They were two true people who found strength in
We're each other's support system.
They both have that shared experience.
until she suddenly disappeared.
Wait!
She usually showed up for visitation.
There's something really wrong going on here.
There are sleepless nights waiting for the phone to ring.
The missing person flyers, I put out like hundreds of them.
Had she run away from the life they'd made?
She had a hard time just trusting men.
Her mental state was not too stable.
It could have been for relapse.
Or was it something far worse?
It didn't appear to.
She also struggled in her relationships with men.
She had a hard time accepting that another person liked her. And that could have came from a variety of different things. But I just know the aftermath is that she really had a hard time maintaining relationships.
Veronica had drifted in and out of relationships for most of her adult life.
But while Veronica's relationships never lasted, they weren't without consequences.
She was the mother of 9, but she had given up all of her children to either family or foster homes.
She never was taught how to love. She never was taught how to really care for people and be passionate and protect your kids.
Still battling depression, she entered her 30s lost and alone. After years of struggling with depression and mental illness, Veronica Jones had finally found a stable, loving home in Stockton, California, with her boyfriend, Devin Epps.
I think we're all looking for love and connection, especially if you're dealing with depression.
Of all the relationships my sister had, that was the most solid relationship.
But now, according to what Devin just told her brother, Veronica has left him for someone else.
According to Devin, the day before Veronica went missing, they met up with a neighbor named Michael who lives in the apartment complex with.
He's on the first floor.
She's able to confirm that Michael and Veronica were actually friends.
And honestly, I don't know why.
She didn't feel Michael was a good person.
But that's not the only thing the manager says that makes detectives suspicious.
At one point, there was a situation where a woman was locked in his apartment and the authorities were called.
You mean he was holding her inside against her will?
Yeah, something like that.
Every year in the U.S., more than 260,000 women go missing. Typically, more than 30% of them are African American, a disproportionate number, since African American women make up only 15% of the U.S. female population.
With Veronica.
Neighbor Michael Thomas has told the detectives searching for 35-year-old Veronica Jones that the missing woman may have taken a bus to Oakland.
I think it was more of a distraction than anything else. Let's shift the focus off of him and that apartment building.
Because it turns out, Michael has a rap sheet full of assault and indecent exposure charges.
He's also under a domestic violence restraining order.
Veronica's not the woman who took out the restraining order, but Michael's record is enough to warrant a closer look.
The detectives decide to reach out to Michael and see if he would make a statement.
Michael agrees to go down to the police station for questioning, but he is a lot less cooperative than he was before.
I already told you guys. I didn't know she was missing until you knocked on my door.
After meeting with the detectives, he went downstairs and beats on Devin's door asking, "Where is Veronica?"
You thought you was going to leave me? Where's Veronica? I don't know. I'm telling you, I think he did something.
We know all about your record.
Manager has little doubt that they finally found Veronica.
The police arrive and they tape off the entire building.
While in the bathroom, authorities try to piece together just what happened.
The body is on its back and is on top of what appears to be a pile of laundry.
It was difficult to tell the cause of death because it had been so long that she'd been sitting on the bathroom floor decomposing.
The head has suffered a tremendous amount of blunt force trauma.
Just as Devin had said, the body did not have a face. But given the circumstances, the detectives are pretty certain that that body is that of Veronica.
Soon after, police take Devin into custody, only a few blocks from his apartment.
Well, once he got kicked out of the apartment, he was found in the street and arrested.
Once in the interrogation room, he agrees to give detectives a statement.
Yes, Veronica.
He confirms that the body in the apartment is Veronica Jones. He tells the detectives that she lives there with him and he absolutely loves her.
Although, that's not all Devin tells detectives.
But she just made me upset because she just kept seeing other people.
To the detectives, this sounded like a prelude to a confession.
It's difficult for women who have been abused to speak up. So I think she had been through a lot in her lifetime, and what she needed was support and help, and not to be re-traumatized. It sounds as if she has been through a lot of trauma in her life, and the way that her life ultimately ended was extremely tragic. Veronica Jones did not deserve to die.
Questioned by
Putting on a show, trying to portray this image that he's just completely lost it.
He had schizophrenia, but not enough so that he couldn't tell right from wrong.
Based on the psychological evaluation, the judge finds Devin competent to stand trial.
He didn't buy it, and the doctor didn't buy it either.
When Devin goes on trial in December of 2012, 1 year after Veronica's remains were discovered, the prosecution focuses on what Devin said in his statement to police.
Prosecutors actually argue that Devin was jealous of her being around other men and wanted to control her.
I could just imagine that with the tension and the anger that Devin would have had from that situation.
You like him, don't you?
Who?
Michael.
We're just friends.
Don't lie to me.
We're not doing this today.
Prosecutors believe that Devin actually tortures her and bludgeons her to death and leaves her there to die.
And jealousy played a major part, more so than schizophrenia.
When it's the defense's turn, they argue that what happened after proves otherwise.
The defense says that the fact that Devin...
It's difficult to define justice because when someone dies, nothing will ever bring that person back. I think when mental illness is involved, it's definitely a more difficult judgment to make as to whether someone is evil or not evil. But I think that the place for Devin Epps to be is definitely not in the streets.
I think she just found it hard to get away because of her mental state. So she was stuck in that relationship, which eventually killed her.
She had a hard time accepting that she was beautiful with all the abuse that she endured in her life. I wish Veronica knew that she was beautiful on the inside as well as the outside. before she passed away.
If you or a loved one are struggling with substance abuse or mental health issues, there is help available. Call the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration at 1-800-662-HELP.
The Alchemy of Ink. The Rise and Fall of the H to H38 Empire. A novel based on the true account of Albert Talton. Prologue, The Specimen Vault. In the heart of Washington, D.C., there is a room that does not exist on any public map of the city. It is a place where history is measured in cotton, linen, and the scent of chemical ink. They call it the Specimen Vault. Behind several layers of biometric security and armed guards, the walls are lined with floor-to-ceiling steel drawers, each containing the shattered dreams of thousands of men who thought they could outsmart the United States Treasury. Kelly Harris, a forensic expert with eyes sharpened by decades of looking at things most people ignore, pulled open a heavy drawer. The air inside the room was climate-controlled, preserving the evidence of a century of greed. Inside lay a $100 bill, pinned to a velvet backing. To the untrained eye, it was Benjamin Franklin staring back with his usual stoic wisdom. But to Kelly, it was a ghost. This one was different. She whispered, her voice echoing against the sterile walls. In the long history of counterfeiting, a crime as old as the nation itself, most forgeries were the work of master engravers or desperate men with offset presses that weighed tons. But this bill, part of the notorious H to H38 strain, was the product of a quiet revolution. It wasn't born in a high-tech lab or a foreign basement. It was born in a townhouse in Lawndale, California, birthed by a man who saw the American dream not as a goal to be earned, but as a code to be hacked. This is the story of Albert Talton, a man who turned hairspray into gold and newsprint into an empire, only to watch it all burn under the relentless gaze of the law. Chapter 1, The Engineer of Inglewood. Albert Talton was never a man of small ambitions. Growing up in Inglewood, California, in the late 70s and 80s, the air was often thick with the scent of jet fuel from wax and the underlying tension of a neighborhood were making it usually meant surviving until Friday. Inglewood was a place of deep contrast tree-lined streets with well-kept lawns shadowed by the reputation of Inglewood, always up to no good. Albert was the outlier. While the other kids were looking for trouble on the street corners or joining the burgeoning gang culture of Los Angeles, Albert was in his garage, surrounded by wires, circuit boards, and the smell of solder. He had the hands of a surgeon and the mind of an electrical engineer. He didn't just play music. He wanted to understand why the bass from a Bose speaker felt like a physical heartbeat against the chest. One afternoon, his friend David Goldberg watched in awe as Albert disassembled a high-end Bose radio he had acquired. "What are you doing?" "Al, that's a $300 system," Goldberg said, leaning against the cluttered workbench. Albert didn't look up. His soldering iron hissed against a circuit board, a small plume of blue smoke rising into the air. "They're charging for the name." "Dave, I want to see the math. I want to know how they get that much air to move in such a small box. It's an acoustic waveguide. It's just geometry and physics. If I can replicate the geometry, I can replicate the sound." Within a week, Albert hadn't just fixed the speaker, he had replicated its internal waveguide using scrap plastic, wood, and his own calculations. He built a car stereo system from scratch that hit harder and cleaner than anything sold in a showroom. It was his first taste of the copycat high, the realization that with enough patience and attention to detail, the world's most expensive secrets were just puzzles waiting to be solved. But the legitimate path was slow and frustrating. After high school, Albert enrolled in electrical engineering courses, but the academic pace felt like a crawl. College was a grind of theories, debt, and professors who didn't understand his practical genius. He dropped out, his brilliance untethered from a degree. He began doing dirt, the local slang for the hustle. He realized that the same mind that could decode a Bose speaker could decode a financial document. He forged checks, a crime that landed him in a cell in the 90s. He committed bank fraud in 2001. each time he went away, he didn't learn to stop. He learned how not to get caught next time. By 2004, Albert Talton was 41 years old, a two-time felon working at a body shop. He was a man with a Ferrari brain stuck in a Hyundai Life, sanding down fenders and mixing paint for customers who didn't know his name. Chapter 2: The Kitchen Laboratory. The startup cost of the greatest digital counterfeiting operation in American history was less than $200. Albert went to a nearby Staples. He didn't buy a printing press or professional engraving tools. He bought a Hewlett-Packard all-in-one printer-scanner-copier. He set it up in his kitchen in his townhouse, the fluorescent light humming overhead like a digital cicada. He laid a genuine $100 bill on the glass. The scanner light crawled across the paper like a blue laser, digitizing Benjamin Franklin into millions of pixels. The first few dozen attempts were embarrassing failures. The colors were saturated, the lines were muddy, and the paper felt like exactly what it was cheap office supply stock. U.S. currency isn't paper, Albert muttered to himself, his eyes bloodshot from staring at a monitor late into the night. It's cloth, 75% cotton, 25% linen. You can't print cloth on a laser jet. The ink just sits there, laughing at you. He began a period of intense research. He discovered that certain types of recycled newsprint had a high fiber content that, when treated and pressed, mimicked the unique snap and feel of a real bill. But the ink was the problem. Albert's breakthrough was a technique he called the glue and fold. He realized that if he printed the front of the bill on one ultra-thin sheet of newsprint and the back on another, he could hide the security features in the middle, like a sandwich. He began sketching the watermark by hand with a diluted white ink on the inside of the paper before gluing the two halves together. For the security thread, he used a thin strip of silver polyester film with USA 100 micro printed on it. When bonded with a specialized industrial adhesive, the security features were embedded inside the bill. But there was one final hurdle. The pen. Iodine-based ink reacted with the starch found in wood-based paper, turning black. Albert found the secret in the beauty aisle, Aquanet hairspray. Specifically, the super extra hold version. It created a microscopic, starch-free barrier that prevented the iodine in the pen from reacting with the wood fibers. Chapter 3, The Shadow Market. As the Lawndale Mint began its first full-scale production, Albert realized that making the money was only half the battle. Moving it was where the real danger lay. He needed a buffer. He summoned Troy Stroud to his townhouse. Stroud was a man of the streets. I don't want to see this money being spent in Lawndale, Troy, Albert said, sliding a fresh stack of hundreds across the coffee table. This isn't for the corner stores around here. This is for the big chains. Target, Walmart, Macy's. Stroud picked up a bill and snapped it between his fingers. The sound was a sharp, satisfying crack. It feels right. Al, they built a pyramid. At the top were Teldon, Stroud, and McCory. Below them were the brokers and men who bought the bills in bulk. These brokers then sold smaller packs to the passers. By 2006, the system was a well-oiled machine. The H to H38 bills were flowing into the registers of Southern California. Albert began to see the fruits of his labor. He wasn't sanding fenders anymore. He was a king in a kingdom of paper and ink. Chapter 4, The Invisible Empire. The true strength of Albert's operation lay in its anonymity. In the drug-infested corners of South Central and the gang turfs of East LA, the H to H38 notes became a secondary currency. Gang members who usually dealt in cocaine or heroin found that selling counterfeit cash was cleaner. There were no bodies to dispose of, no rival territories to defend with gunfire, just a steady stream of funny money that felt indistinguishable from the real thing. It's better than the white powder. Man, a lower-level distributor told Troy Stroud during a midnight meeting at a car wash. The feds look for drugs. They look for bodies. They don't look for a guy buying a Big Mac with a crisp 100. But the gang involvement brought a different kind of risk. The risk of silence. Gang members didn't talk to the police. They had a code. If someone was caught with a fake bill, they took the rap. They told stories about selling a car or getting paid for an odd job in cash. Albert watched from his distance, fascinated by how his invention was reshaping the local criminal economy. He wasn't just a counterfeiter anymore. He was a central banker for the underground. He began to feel a sense of godlike detachment. He was the one who decided how much wealth flowed into the streets of L.A. I'm stabilizing the neighborhood. Paul, Albert said to McCory one evening as they watched the sunset from the balcony of a new apartment. I'm giving people a way to survive without the violence. I'm the ghost in the machine. McCory looked at him, worried. The ghost usually gets caught when the machine breaks down. Al, we're moving too much. We're making too much noise. Chapter 5, The Woodland Hills Mirage. Success didn't just change Albert's bank account. It changed his reality. He began to live a life that was a carefully constructed mirage. A suburban dream funded by a secret factory of lies. He moved Allison Sewell into a sprawling home in Woodland Hills. To the neighbors, they were a successful, upwardly mobile couple. Albert would arrive in his silver Aston Martin Vantage. The engines growl a symphony of status. He wore designer clothes that hid the ink stains on his fingertips. But inside the house, the tension was rising. Allison saw the cars, the 7 flat-screen TVs, and the bags of designer clothes, but she also saw the shadow in Albert's eyes. He was always calculating, always listening for a siren that hadn't come yet. Where is it really coming from? Al, she asked one night, looking out over the manicured lawn. You say it's consulting, but you're always in that garage or at that townhouse in Lawndale. You're never actually at an office. I told you, baby, I'm building something, Albert said, sipping a glass of expensive cognac. I'm solving a problem that the government couldn't solve. I'm making sure we never have to worry about a 9-to-5 again. It feels like we're living in a glass house, she whispered. Albert didn't respond. He was thinking about the next batch of 20s. He was thinking about the Staples reward card and how close he was to his next free ink cartridge. He didn't see the glass house. He only saw the view. Chapter 6. The human cost Maria's bodega. While Albert was enjoying the spoils in Woodland Hills, the ripple effect of his innovation was hitting the streets in a far more brutal way. Maria, a 60-year-old grandmother, ran a small bodega in East LA. Her profit margins were razor thin, measured in cents on gallons of milk and packs of cigarettes. One Tuesday afternoon, a young man in a hooded sweatshirt bought a $20 phone card and a soda using a crisp $100 bill. Maria did what she always did. She took out her detection pen and ran it across the note. The line stayed a bright, reassuring amber. She handed the young man $85 in genuine change money she had earned through 12 hours of standing on her feet. On Friday, Maria went to the bank to pay her rent. The teller fed the $100 bill into a high-speed counting machine. The machine made a sharp, stuttering sound and spat the bill back out. "I'm sorry, Maria," the teller said, her voice full of practiced sympathy. "This bill is counterfeit. It's part of that H2H38 strain we've been seeing. But the pen said it was good." Maria stammered, her heart sinking. "They found a way to trick the pens. I have to confiscate this. I can't give you credit for it." Maria walked out of the bank, $85 poorer and $100 short on her rent. To Albert Talton, that 100 was just a piece of newsprint and a few cents of ink. To Maria, it was the difference between keeping her lights on and sitting in the dark. The alchemist wasn't just copying money, he was stealing time and survival from the people least able to afford the loss. Chapter 7. The Cold Trail. For the Secret Service, 2007 was the year of the Cold Trail. Special Agent Matthew Mayo was drowning in red pins on his map. The H to H38 strain was appearing everywhere, not just in LA, but in Las Vegas, Phoenix, and even as far east as New York. "It's a ghost operation," Mayo told his supervisor. We arrest the passers. They say they found it. We arrest the street dealers. They say they bought it from a guy in a mask at a park. No one knows the printer. It's like the money is falling from the sky. Mayo spent night after night in the evidence room, staring at the enlarged images of the bills. He looked for a flaw, a singular imperfection that could serve as a digital fingerprint. But the alchemist was too careful. Every bill was a perfect copy of the one before it. He's not changing the plates, Mayo realized. He's using the same source file, H to H38. He's so confident in the quality that he doesn't think the serial number matters. This arrogance was the first crack in the wall. Mayo knew that if he could find the pattern in the distribution where the bills were appearing first each week, he could find the center of the spider web. But Los Angeles was a big web, and the spider was staying deep in the shadows. Chapter 7, The Forensic Maze. In the specimen vault in D.C., Kelly Harris was beginning to notice a pattern that would haunt her for the next 2 years. It's the serial numbers, she said to an intern. Most digital counterfeiters are sloppy, but this guy, he's used the same plate positions H2 and H38 for over $1 million in currency. He's arrogant. He thinks the physical quality of the bill is so good that we'll never look at the numbers. She examined the edges of the note under a 400x magnification. Look at the ink. It's not bleeding. And the paper. It's high grade, recycled newsprint. While Kelly was decoding the bill, Special Agent Matthew Mayo was hitting the streets of Los Angeles. The H to H38 strain had become the office's top priority. The break came on January 14th, 2008. A low-level passer tried to buy $1,000 worth of designer clothes with all 10 identical bills at once at an H&M. The cashier hit the alarm. Mayo interrogated the suspect, a man named Marcus. I understand that you're facing 10 years, Marcus, but if you give me a name, maybe we can talk to the DA who sold you the money. I only know a guy they call Troy. He drives a white Range Rover. Chapter 9, The Sneak and Peek. With the name Troy Stroud, the Secret Service began a clandestine surveillance operation. They followed Stroud's Range Rover for months. Mayo and Puentes decided it was time for a sneak and peek warrant. They entered Stroud's residence while he was in Las Vegas. Nothing, Mayo said, standing in Stroud's kitchen. There's no manufacturing equipment here. He's just a distributor. But then Mayo noticed a crumpled receipt for a car wash in Lawndale in a trash can. On the back, someone had scribbled H to H38. The investigation shifted to Lawndale. They found the name, Albert Talton, a two-time felon working at a body shop, living in a townhouse far beyond his means. Mayo and Puentes set up a command center in a hotel across from Talton's townhouse. They watched as Albert washed his trash cans and moved his luxury cars. They watched the blue glow of printers through the upstairs windows. Chapter 10, The Art of the Deal. Inside the townhouse, Albert was beginning to feel the pressure. The demand was growing. We need more printers, Al Goldberg said. The HPs are burning out. By 6 more, Albert said, use the Staples card. I want the reward points. Albert was obsessed. He had moved to 20s. If we get the 20 right, we own the city. People spend 20s without thinking. On May 7th, 2008, Stroud called. He needed $1 million in hundreds, the largest single order in the history of the Lawndale Mint. Across the street, Agent Mayo heard every word through a directional microphone. Tell the tactical team to gear up, Mayo said. Tomorrow is payday. Chapter 11, The Noose Tightens. The final 48 hours of the Lawndale Mint were a blur of frantic activity. Albert hadn't slept in 2 days. The air in the townhouse was toxic with the smell of wet ink and hairspray. He had 6 printers running at full capacity, their mechanical chirping a constant reminder of the deadline. The Stroud order is almost ready, McCory said, his eyes bloodshot. But the neighbors are looking at us. Al, a guy in a suit has been sitting in a sedan down the block for 3 hours. Albert didn't look up from the cutting board. It's a public street, Paul. People sit in cars. Finish the bundles. but Albert felt it to the static in the air. The ghost feeling was fading, replaced by a cold, heavy weight in the pit of his stomach. He looked at the stacks of hundreds on the floor. They looked like paper now. Just paper. The magic was gone. One more run, Albert whispered to himself. One more million, and I'm out. I'll take Allison to Europe. We'll disappear. But the noose was already tight. Across the street, in the hotel room, Agent Mayo was looking through a telescope, watching the silhouettes move against the blue light of the printers. He could see the exhaustion in their movements. He could see the end. Chapter 12, The Raid on Wandale, May 8th, 2008. The morning was quiet. Inside the townhouse, the printers were screaming. Albert, Goldberg, and McCory were cutting, gluing, and spraying in a chemical fog. That's the last bale, Goldberg said. 1 million for 100,000. Suddenly, a sound shattered the morning arrhythmic, heavy pounding. Thud, thud, thud. The front door exploded inward. Federal agents, get down, get down. Tactical gear swamped the room. Flashbangs blinded Albert. He saw Agent Mayo step through the smoke. Albert Talton, Mayo said, I've been looking forward to this meeting. Albert slowly raised his hands. I suppose you have. You caught me in the middle of a print run. They found $162,000 in finished notes and 1.4 million in progress. The H to H38 empire was crushed. Chapter 13, The Pride of the Alchemist. The interrogation was a lecture. Albert sat in the federal building, ink-stained and tired. How did you find the paper, Agent Mayo? It shouldn't have been traceable. It wasn't the paper, Albert. It was the reward card. You were so worried about $5 in points that you gave us the map to your front door. Albert laughed. The points. The one variable I didn't account for was my own frugality. He spent hours detailing the operation, proud of the pH balance of his hairspray and his glue and fold geometry. I wasn't a criminal agent. I was a competitor. I saw a monopoly on the dollar, and I challenged it. Chapter 14, The Reckoning, the Trial. The federal courtroom in Los Angeles was a theater of high stakes. Albert Talton sat at the defense table, his suit perfectly tailored, his expression one of calm detachment. He looked more like a CEO facing a regulatory hearing than a counterfeiter facing a decade in prison. The prosecution called their witnesses. Special Agent Neo described the surveillance and the raid. Kelly Harris brought the specimens from the vault, explaining to the jury how H to H38 had become a nightmare for the Treasury. But the moment that shifted the air in the room was when Maria, the bodega owner, took the stand. She spoke in a quiet, trembling voice about the $100 bill that cost her rent. She spoke about the shame of being fooled and the fear of losing her business. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked directly at Albert. "You make the paper look real," she said, her voice suddenly strong. "But the hearts of the people who take it, that is not real to you. You didn't just print money, you printed pain." Albert shifted in his seat. For the first time, his gaze dropped. The math of his crime was no longer just about ink and newsprint. It was about the grandmother in the front row who had lost $85 and her peace of mind. The judge's voice was like a hammer as he delivered the sentence. "Mr. Talton, you are a man of extraordinary talent, but you have used that talent to manufacture a lie. You are sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. Chapter 15, The Gray Years. Prison stagnated time. In Lompoc, Albert was just another number. The Aston Martin was replaced by a bunk bed, the luxury by cold steel. But the alchemist's mind didn't stop. He became a tutor, helping younger inmates earn their GEDs. "It's all about the variables," he would tell them. "Life is just a long equation." He watched the 2008 financial crisis unfold from behind bars. "Look at that, Dave," he whispered to Goldberg. The big banks were printing worthless paper just like we were. Only they called it derivatives. And they didn't have to worry about hairspray. Allison visited once. They took the house. Al, everything is gone. It was built on ghosts. "I know," Albert said. "I built a ghost town, and I invited you to live in it. Chapter 16, The Echo of the H2H38. The impact rippled for years. Retailers invested millions in new scanners. The Secret Service used H2H38 as a case study. In 2013, the Treasury released a new $100 bill with a 3D ribbon. Kelly Harris stood at her desk, holding one of the new bills. It's beautiful engineering. But somewhere, another Albert Talton is saying, I could do this better. Are we ready? Her colleague gasped. The alchemist didn't have a billion-dollar lab. Kelly reminded him. He had a kitchen and hairspray. You can't out-engineer a man who sees the world as a code to be broken. Epilogue. The Ghost in the Machine. Albert Talton was released in late 2017. He emerged into a world of digital wallets and cryptocurrencies, a world where physical cash was becoming increasingly irrelevant. He walks the streets of Los Angeles, a man with a brilliant mind and a shadowed past. He lives a quiet life, perhaps in a repair shop, taking things apart to see how they work. He is older now, no longer looking for the shortcut. He understands that some codes aren't meant to be hacked. The H2H38 bills are slowly disappearing. But somewhere, in a dusty register, a ghost of Franklin is still staring back, a silent reminder of the man who almost stole the American dream. Albert sometimes catches the scent of chemical ink and hairspray. He smiles a bittersweet smile and keeps walking into a world where the only thing he's trying to solve for is his own peace of mind. The end. The Bone Fields. A Shetland Mystery. Chapter 1. The Salt and the Stone. The wind in Shetland never truly sleeps. It is a restless, ancient thing that moans through the eaves of the gray stone houses and carries the sharp, stinging scent of brine and wet peat across the treeless hills. To the locals, it is a constant companion. To outsiders, a warning. For Detective Inspector Jimmy Perez, it was the soundtrack to a life defined by the rhythms of the North Sea, a life where the line between the land and the water was as blurred as the line between the past and the present. Inside his house, The morning was a chaotic blur of domesticity, a small island of warmth against the gray Atlantic morning. The kitchen smelled of slightly burnt toast, stale coffee, and the lingering dampness of wool coats that never quite dried. "Who's there? Is that you?" Jimmy called out from the hallway, his voice still thick with the remnants of a restless sleep haunted by dreams of dark water. His daughter, Cassie, burst into the room like a gale force wind. "Dad, Dad, Dad," she shouted, her voice a sharp, youthful contrast to the low growl of the wind outside. "Have you got everything? You got your gloves and your homework?" And she stopped abruptly, dropping her bag on the floor and eyeing his attire with a look of profound teenage judgment. "What do you think this is? A fashion choice." Jimmy looked down at his sweater of faded, oversized navy wool piece that had seen better decades. It was Norse mythology week at the station. "Cassie, I thought I'd blend in with the Vikings." "Right, don't be cheeky," she retorted, her fingers flying as she stuffed a forgotten notebook into her bag. "And don't pretend like you're organized. We're 15 minutes late already, and I have that presentation on the clearances." He watched her with a pang of bittersweet pride. She had her mother's fire, a sharpness of mind that often left him feeling a step behind. "Mama, Mama," he called out for his mother-in-law, the silent, sturdy anchor of their household. But only the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator answered him. She was likely already out, tending to the garden or visiting a neighbor, moving through the world with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had survived much. The drive to the Lerwick police station was a familiar, winding path through a landscape of charcoal gray cliffs and churning white water. The island seemed to hunker down under the weight of the clouds. Inside the station, the air was warmer, thick with the smell of floor wax and printer ink, but the atmosphere was no less busy. "Morning, Billy." Jimmy nodded to the desk sergeant, a man whose face was a map of every minor infraction in Lerwick for the last 30 years. "Morning, Craig," he added to the officer frantically filing paperwork. Anything besides the usual Friday night fallout? Robert Yunson's in the cells, Billy replied, not looking up from his ledger. Drunk in the market square at 3 this morning, singing at the top of his lungs. Some old Norse ballad about a giant and a whale. The tourists thought it was part of the local charm until he started trying to sacrifice a traffic cone. Jimmy chuckled, hanging his coat. Any news for the Uphelly AA committee? The town's buzzing. Billy's face finally broke into a grin. Uphelly the Great Fire Festival was the heartbeat of the winter, the moment when the islands reclaimed their Viking soul. It's Justin. The geyser Jarl thinks it'll be the best festival we've ever had. Oh.